Hello and welcome to Young Africa, our continental youth show by the young. I'm Abdillahi Hassan, your host, and today it is my pleasure to bring you this show because it is about a subject that is dear to my heart. It is about knowledge and knowledge production. With me in the show is my dear friend, a bookworm and research enthusiast, Khadar Mohamed Muhumed. It's not your first time to be in the show. You've been here before. Welcome to the show again.
Thank you, Abdillahi, for having me. I'm very happy to be back again, and thank you very much. As you said, you have interviewed me, I think, last year about my book, which I published last year, entitled Kalaman, which was about the rise and fall of the Somaliland Somalia talks. The topic of studying the Somaliland Somalia talks was my MA thesis back in Turkey. I published, after completing my MA thesis, I developed it into a book in Somali language by the name Kalaman, which we discussed here before. And recently, in early 2019, I have published the article academically.
Why did you choose to make the book in Somali?
You know, I had the idea that this book was very important. The topic, was very important. And I don't know why, but the scholars or the researchers of Somali studies actually neglected a very important topic, which was, could change the whole situation of the Somali society if there was an agreement at the end. So, and later, I think early this year, 2019, I have also published an academic article about the same topic.
Incidentally, that was also about research, and today our topic is also knowledge production and research. So tell me a little bit more about some of your other works.
I sometimes refer to myself as a researcher because I have published around 6 academic articles and a book as well. That book was also based on an academic research or study. Apart from my publication or my article on the Somaliland Somalia talks, I can also mention my other areas of research or interest, which is the economy. So I have published several articles on economics, but mainly on Somaliland economy. I have published around 2 articles. The last one was about the sustainability of Somaliland livestock trade. So me and my colleague from the University of Hargeisa studied, to understand how the future of Somaliland livestock exports could look like, and is the Somaliland livestock trade sustainable? After we have seen, several threats or problems, challenges facing that sector, which is the most important sector of Somaliland economy, we wanted to understand, can we rely on the livestock trade for the next 10 or 20 years, or do we need to focus or study on other economic sectors? So that study was funded by the University of Hargeisa. In 2018, we presented it at the Somali Studies International Association Congress, which was held in Hargeisa. The 13th Congress was held in Hargeisa last year, and then we published it in an article.
So you said the question was, is it sustainable the way we do livestock trade right now? What was the answer?
So our findings, actually, according to our findings, we were not very hopeful about the future of Somaliland livestock trade. Given a number of challenges that maybe I cannot cover all of it now, but given the threats, originating from the neighboring countries, like competition from Djibouti and Ethiopia, maybe a threat to the border trade between Somaliland and Ethiopia, and also threats coming from the Middle East, our market or the destination of our livestock. I would say we were not hopeful actually, and that's available. Everybody can access it and read the findings in detail.
Although you are not professionally in the research field now, but still it appeals to you, given that you talk about it a lot. So what is the appeal, the research and this knowledge production process?
Well, as you said, I like research and I like doing research a lot. Why? Because research is both interesting and challenging. When I'm saying interesting, it's very interesting, as a person, you sometimes face some questions that you would like to find their answers. So it's very interesting to go that journey, to take that journey and try to find the answer. That's very interesting. Challenging, it's challenging because sometimes it takes, a whole effort to do very small job. So for example, you may read 10 articles to write a paragraph. So in a way, it's challenging. The other thing is that research, we do research, or it's important because we try to solve problems. As a society, as a nation, as a government, there are some certain problems that we are facing. So in order to find solution for those problems, the best way is to do research or to study those issues, and also to answer some questions that society faces or your community faces. But above all, I would say the reason we do research is all about truth seeking, because we need to know the truth. We need to know what's right, what's wrong, actually, what's important, what's not. So I would say research is very important, and I would actually encourage most of our academics to do research continuously.
So his job is it actually to do research and undertake those academic researches?
So mainly it's the responsibility of the higher education institutions, particularly universities, to do that part of academic research. But also, apart from universities, there are also some, for example, institutions who are not affiliated with academic institutions, like research centers or think tanks, who also do research as well. So I would say it's mainly the responsibility of the higher education institutions, but also it can be done outside the higher education
institutions. To start with higher education institutions, how do you measure knowledge production in higher education?
Well, knowledge production is a very broad topic. And in this program, I'm not planning to talk about, the entire topic. I just want to focus on knowledge production in higher education through research. So how to measure that, according to your question, one is you can look at the number of research centers that are available, for example, in that country or in that area. And research centers are two. Ones are the research centers hosted by the universities, or they are affiliated with the academic institutions, and others are those who work outside the universities. So first we can look at the number of research centers we have. Number two, we can look at the research funding or the budget that is allocated for research. So for example, universities, what's the budget or the funding that the research allocated for research and doing all research works. So that's other thing you can look at. Third, you can look at the number of academic journals which are produced in those areas. For example, in the Somali context now we're talking about, or in Somaliland in particular, we can look at how many academic journalists do we have in Somaliland, for example. What's their frequency? And I mean, are they published very annually or biannually or quarterly, or we can look at that. And then we can look at the volume of publications and what are the publications that this country or this area produces for a certain period of time. For example, we can say how many, and when we are talking about publications, we are not talking about academic articles. We are talking about, papers, policy papers. We are talking about other works. We are talking about books. All those academic publications, can be considered as a knowledge production or a way of producing knowledge. So that's also another part. We can also look at the what's the quality or the impact of this research that all these people and institutions are doing. So I think there are different areas, different ways that we can evaluate or measure the knowledge production, but I would like to touch those certain areas.
To take it one by one and start with higher education institutions, how many of those do we have in the Somali context that undertake research?
Well, so I think higher education institutions are a new, I would say, phenomenon for the Somalis. So apart from few universities who located in Mogadishu before the collapse of the state, I would say they just started recently. And now they're mainly private. And I think the quality is not that good according to the public. So I would like to take few universities from across the Somali territories and focus on maybe their work. So the first one is Mogadishu University. I think it's one of the oldest. It was established in 1997. And it's a very large, actually university. And it hosts this Institute for Somali Studies. So Institute for Somali Studies publishes, actually does a number of academic, publications and works and things like that. They also host a journal that I would talk about in detail later, but that's one of them. Another university is Amud, the oldest university in Somaliland is Amud. It was actually established in 1998, but they don't do that much of research actually. There are some, I would say there are research which are done by the faculty members, separately. But as a university, I think they have just started to publish their first academic journal, and that's just, they're in the initial stage. So the third one is University of Hargeisa, which was established in 2000, and it hosts two important actual research centers. One is the Research and Community Service Directorate, which is responsible for the research of the university, and it does a very good job, and I think they have some specific budget allocated for them, and they use it for research. So that's one thing. We can also focus on the Institute for Peace and Conflict Studies, which is very important, one of the most important institutions of the University of Hargeisa. They have been doing a good job for a long time. They're affiliated with different institutions, and they publish a journal, they publish serious papers, things like that. So I would like to mention those, to highlight those three higher education institutions.
Next, we will go to the research centers that are not affiliated with academic institutions, but after this break.
Welcome to CBA's News Bulletin, broadcasting to you from Hargeisa. My name is Yunus Deko.
You are watching CBA TV. I am Wango Ngoge from Hargeisa. Thank you for keeping it CBA TV. Reaching out to our global viewers through digital and television platforms from our two major broadcast centers and exclusive reporting from East Africa and beyond.
From Nigeria, Ajara Ahmed Tijani reporting for CBA TV.
Join us in engaging talk shows and programs on a wide range of issues.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you for accepting our interview. My name is Hassan.
I'm Abdillahi. Hassan, welcome to Unscripted.
Welcome to Associate, proudly brought to you by CBA TV.
Welcome once again to Artflix.
I welcome you to your show, our show, CBA TV News Review.
Our digital platforms engage users everywhere. We inform, educate, and entertain. We are CBA TV, the voice of East Africa.
Welcome back to the show. We were at the research institutions that are not affiliated with academic institutions. How many do we have here in the Somali context?
Okay, so as we said, research is not only done in academic institutions, it can also be done outside the academic institutions. So we have some research centers actually who have been doing a great job in the Somali context for a long time and have been publishing, reports or articles or papers about problems or ongoing issues, in the Somali context. So one of them is the Academy for Peace and Development, which is based in Somaliland. It was founded in the 1990s. And it was founded by very brilliant, academics from the West, Somali academics from the West, like Professor Bulhan. It was very important actually, and in the initial stage, it has done a tremendous and very important job that it published, a number of articles and reports and things like that. So it's very important. So, for example, a while ago we were talking about our study on livestock. Actually, in 2002, the Academy for Peace and Development published a seminal work on the Somaliland livestock sector. So that's one of them. Next, we can also mention Soradi, which is a research center based in Hargeisa, and it's been doing a good job for a long time as well. Others include Heritage Institute, which is based in Mogadishu, and it actually continuously publishes reports and academic articles and things like that. It was also founded by very brilliant Somali young Somalis, I can mention Maanta, who was a prominent journalist before coming to Mogadishu and founding this institute with other friends. The last one I would like to mention is Sidra Institute, which is also a policy analysis and research institute based in Garowe, Puntland. They're also doing a very good job, and you can find the huge, actually very important work they're doing.
So these research centers that you have highlighted, what kind of research do they do? What areas do they focus on?
Well, in the Somali context, you will rarely find research on pure science or life science or things like that. We mainly focus on social problems, or social issues. So most of them focus on, the social sciences areas of the research, whether it's political science, whether it's economy, development studies, humanitarian side, things like that.
For those research to have an impact on the social life and the real life and find solutions for real life situations, they need to be disseminated and published. And there's where the journalists come in. So how many journalists that we have here in the Somali territories that deal with, scientific research or social research even?
Okay, when it comes to academic journals, I don't want to talk about only those who are published inside the Somali territories, whether it's Somalia or Somaliland or other places. Why? Because most important research, academic articles are published outside the country. So I would like to focus all the, like the academic journals in the Somali context or in the Somali studies. And I would like to highlight or to take, as an example, three important academic articles, journals I mean. The first one is actually the first Somali Studies journal. It's Bildan, it's called Bildan, an international journal of Somali Studies. It's been published since 2001, and I think it's the oldest. And now it's in volume 19, and its chief editor is Professor Ahmed Ismail Samatar, a well-known academic in the Somali Studies and in the Somali context. And it's hosted by Samatar's institution, McMaster College in the United States. So that was the oldest, and I think one of the most important academic journals that we have in the Somali Studies. The second one is the Journal of Somali Studies. It's been published since 2014, and now it's in volume 6. And it's one of the most important editors of this journal is Professor Ali Chamale Ahmed, who is a professor at the City University of New York. And this journal is hosted by Adonis and Abi publishers. So they're not affiliated with academic institution. They're published by publishers like Elsevier, Sage, those well-known publishers. So this journal is hosted by Adonis and Abi publishers. The last one is a journal which is published in Somalia. It's published in Mogadishu. It's Somali Studies. Its name is Somali Studies, a peer-reviewed academic journal for Somali Studies. It's been published since 2016, and now it's volume 4. Its chief editor is Mustafa Fairouz, who is a faculty member at the Mogadishu University's Institute for Somali Studies, and it's hosted by the Institute for Somali Studies, Mogadishu University. And I would like to say that this is the journal that I have published my last article on the Somaliland Somali talks.
That's great, but from going through the history of the academic journalists, Somali academic journalists, I sense that they are all young. The oldest is less than 2 decades old. Are there some challenges that they are facing?
I would say for the last, or before actually 10 years, there were very few Somalis who were doing, this, who were active in the academia and were publishing. Now we have very young, academics who are doing all these publications and research work. But before, it was few of them, and most of them were based in the West. So I would like to mention that Professor Hussein Mohamed Adam, Professor Tanzania, founded the Somali Studies International Association back in 1978. So in an effort actually to bring together all the Somalistes, or we would say all the researchers or the scholars who are interested in the Somali studies. So that was a very good example. And as I told you, it was celebrating its 40th anniversary last year in 2018, and it was held actually that anniversary celebration and also the 13th Congress was held in Hargeisa, and I was lucky also to present one of my research or studies in that Congress as well. So as you said, there are several challenges that research in general is facing in the Somali context. So one of them, if you look at the universities in the Somali territories, for example, research is not a priority. That's the main problem. So if you see, most of them are like teaching institutions. They work like, so if you are in higher education, you should not work like a primary or secondary school. You are apart from teaching, you also need to produce knowledge. You need to do academic activities, very important activities, apart from teaching. So the first thing, the problem is that research is not a priority. You will see that they are not, making it priority and things like that. So the one. Number two, there is lack of funding. So our institutions, for example, those who are hosted by the academic institutions, the academic institutions are not allocating that much of fund or research or budget for this. So you cannot do a research without a fund or a budget. Research is very expensive actually. So it must be a priority for the university to have a budget, to allocate a certain budget for research. Another thing is there is lack of good researchers actually locally, I would say, or genuine academics. Why do I say that? Because if you see most of the local universities, the lecturers, we have very few, professors or associate professors, or assistant professors. Most of them are lecturers. And it seems that they only do like teaching, this part of teaching. And if you're an academic, you don't need to just teach. You need to do other activities, like you need to publish regularly. You also need to, for example, present your findings or your research in conferences, things like that. So you will find most of the academic or most of the faculty members in local universities do not even consider themselves as academics.
How do they consider themselves?
They sometimes work as a teachers. You don't need to be a teacher or or just a teacher when you are in higher education institution. You need to be doing a work, which is more than teaching. So that's one thing. And the last problem is actually absence of data. There is no data in Somaliland. For example, one of my areas of interest is economics. Well, if you want to do and carry out or conduct any academic economics research, all you need is data, and you don't have that. So that's why you don't find many academic works, many works published about or on economics or economy in general in Somaliland. So the responsibility of this, problem should not be taken by the academic institutions only, but also by the governments. The government should prepare data, for the national data. Then the academics can exploit that and use that for their research.
So those are hosts of problems, actually pressing problems.
Yes.
What do you think that knowledge producers and researchers in the Somali context can overcome those challenges?
Well, I would say now, for the last, I would say, a decade, there is very, I see, taking into account the recent young academics who have been doing a very good job in this area. I would say that the future of Somali studies, of Somali research is bright. I'm very hopeful, but there are still some challenges that we need to deal with, so then we can have all this knowledge production and good research. The first one is we need more and active research centers, whether they are based in universities or outside universities, but in universities actually. It's unacceptable to have a university without any research center. Okay, if I talk about, for example, let me take an example. Back in Turkey, when I was doing my MA thesis, my university was very small. I mean, not that small when it hosted around 40,000 students, but it was young. And I can remember that it hosted around 30 research centers. So what we are talking about...
But it's well funded. You talk about the problem of funding.
Yes.
How do you suggest that this problem overcome?
I think we can still overcome this problem of funding. But first, we need, as you said, the funding comes first. But also, you don't also need funding. You have, if you have, some active and smart researchers who are, leading this institution, I think they can also find some research grants, some collaboration with international universities. They can look at different areas, for funding. So the first thing we need is more research centers. I mean, it's not, as I said, right, to have university without any research center or without any research, institution. So that's one thing. Another one is we need more journals. So now, as you said, we have more young Somali researchers who want to publish their articles. So instead of publishing, in foreign based journalists, we need more journalists locally. So for example, every university can start to have a research center and then to have a journal, to host a journal, at least one. So then at least the academic staff of that university and the students have a platform, to publish their works. We also need more publications. I want to talk about this in detail. How can we get more publications? But there must be more publications. What I mean is, it must be a priority for all the students and the academic staff, the faculty members in every university in the Somali territories to publish. So then we can have more publications. I think the quality might not be that good, in the first stage, but we can still have more, publications.
So how do you suggest that we increase the number of publications?
Well, one of them is, if you look at all the universities in the world, it's mandatory for professors or academic staff, for the faculty members of every institution to publish regularly. That's one, a way to keep your position. Otherwise, we have another active researcher or academic, a professor who's doing all this job and can do the job. So that's one thing. Most of the universities must make priority mandatory for their professors, for their academic staff, for their lecturers to publish. That's one thing. Number two, if you look at most of the universities in the world, when you are a graduate student studying a master's degree or a doctoral degree, you need to publish an article, at least an article, fulfilled to meet all the requirements of gaining or getting your degree. So there must be, universities must make mandatory for the graduate students to at least publish to graduate. So for example, after you complete your MA thesis or MS thesis, you have to publish.
So you are suggesting that you make publishing an article a requirement for graduation?
That's how it is. That's what I'm saying. Like back in Turkey, I'm talking about my experience. For example, I couldn't get my degree even when I met all the requirements unless I published an article.
The student is already doing his thesis?
Yes. All we need is, you have already conducted the research. You need to publish it. In order to publish it, it must have the quality and the standard of an article that can be published. It's not that difficult. Let me take you, for example, back in 2017, I was a faculty member at the University of Hargeysa's School of Economics. I was supervising an undergraduate thesis, and actually one of the groups, two students that I was supervising, we ended up publishing an article together. So I helped them to publish the article because they did a very good job. What I'm saying is, it must be the responsibility of the supervisor and the students, for the first place, to do a very good research that can be published. So that's one thing. And then the faculty members, it must be mandatory for them to publish as well. And the last thing is, we need funding. To do research, you need funding. So I would encourage most of the local universities actually to allocate some budget or some fund for research, and also to collaborate with other universities and other institutions outside the university to secure some funding for the research of the university.
Research is also funded a lot in the Western world and in the developing world by private sector grantees. How is that in Somaliland?
I think that doesn't work now. For example, as you said, there are some problems which the business people themselves need to understand or solve, or some certain questions that they would like to have answers for them. So in the world, as you said, they normally collaborate with universities or academic institutions so they can solve a problem. But now, locally, I don't think our businesses do that now. They collaborate with higher education institutions in different ways. For example, they help them building classrooms or building halls or things like that. But they can also invest, research of the universities as well. So that's what also we need to look at. And it seems that now our research is mainly based on social sciences, as I said, or humanities. we also need to go to science. So we need lab, or that funding and thing, budget. But I think we can still do that.
Well, time is pressing us, so I'll give you one more chance to tell me about your view of the outlook of research and knowledge production, especially in higher education institutions in the Somali territories.
Well, as I said, compared to the Western world or the Asia or even neighboring countries in Africa, we are behind actually. We are not doing well in research when it comes to research. And one of the striking things that I would like to mention is that if you look at the Somali studies, if, for example, 100 articles is published this year about Somalis or on Somali studies, I think over 60 of them are published by foreigners.
60?
Over 60 of those articles. So what I'm saying is our academics or Somali academics are not doing that much in research actually. We have very few Somali academics who are doing that much effort to do this publishing. And now the Somali studies is still, as it was earlier, dominated by foreigner Somalistes.
And that needs to change. We will leave.
That needs to change actually.
We will leave it there. Thank you for joining us. This was Young Africa. We'll be back next week. Thank you for watching us.